This monthly overview is called Critical Conditions and Finding Coherence. So, there are three distinct experiences contained in the month of September that we are challenged to cohere. We have many tools at our disposal to do this work, but we'll have to roll up our sleeves and make some painstaking edits to achieve this coherence. Some of us might find this enjoyable. Virgo, I'm looking at you. At the top of the month, we have two important planetary stations. We have Venus' station direct on September 3rd and Jupiter's station direct on September 4th. Venus turns direct today after her 6-week journey exploring the underbelly of our desires. Once she picks up speed in her forward motion, we can implement all that we learned while we were examining the depths of our hearts. While Jupiter prepares its journey back in time, we can expect to learn salient lessons about how we value the material bodies of the earth and of the flesh. As Venus in Leo and Jupiter in Taurus adjust to their transitions, they will be in alignment, suggesting some dynamic action around those topics. The new moon in Virgo on the 14th, followed by Mercury's station direct in Virgo on the 15th, asks us to make choices. Um, After, we just had the Venus retrograde, after we've had some time to reflect on our values, what we want. And Virgo is the last phase of experience that everything must go through to determine if something is qualified, good enough, or healthy enough to withstand exposure to the external world. A key word for Virgo is critical, and I mean that in all of its multiple meanings. The month ends with the sun's entrance into Libra, which is the autumnal equinox, on the 23rd, and a full moon in Aries graces us on the 29th. Right on cue, at the end of the month, we are thrust into relationship with each other and the outside world after a deeply internal summer. And so we might be asking the question, who are we now? And where do we fit into all of this? And the monthly horoscope for Virgo, which could apply to everyone this season, is this. So, with Mercury going back and forth through your first house, Virgo risings, or going back and forth over your sun for Virgo suns, with Mercury doing that, I'm also imagining the back and forth motion of a blade being sharpened by a stone. There's something you're honing, whether it's your body, your mind, or a personal project. Be careful not to over scrape or press too hard, because there's honing and sharpening, and there's rigor, and then there's burnout, which actually dulls the mind and the senses. So you're being tasked this month to find your sharpest edge, the sharpest edge of your abilities, without going over that edge. There is work to be done, though, and we can more efficiently do this work by sharpening up our methods and systems so that we can get the highest quality of something with the least amount of effort. So, you can find the rest of your horoscopes and this monthly overview in Chronogram magazine online and on shelves now. All right. So let's get into a little more detail here, or maybe a lot more detail, with the transits of the week. So, as I've mentioned already, the first major event taking place happens today. Finally, the moment we've all been waiting for. Venus stations direct in Leo after approximately 40 days and 40 nights of her underworld journey. Venus stops and changes direction. We've been talking about Venus in Leo since June. And to be honest, I'm a little I'm a little sick of it. But wow. I mean, that retrograde was eventful. Um, as far as news and world events that we can look to, we have almost too many climate events to name. And of course, Venus retrogrades correspond to major turning points in general on the world stage when we're doing mundane astrology and sometimes in natal astrology as well. Um, Lots of naturally beautiful places, places of respite, um, unexpectedly going up in flames, being submerged in water, or just becoming uninhabitable for some other reason. Um, but staying in the vein of Venus being a relationship planet, many news outlets started calling this summer breakup summer. So, a lot of sources like The Cut and Jezebel, or Vice or New York Post, out a lot of outlets like that have coined this breakup summer and have actually compiled lists of all the celebrity breakups and divorces that happened this summer. I think I recall reading one, and there were about like 30 or 40 couples on that list just over like a 2-month period. And a lot of these breakups involved controversy and sometimes sex scandal, but these are very Venus retrograde themes. And Leo, being the sign of celebrity and all that is easily seen, it's always interesting when we're looking at mundane astrology to see what's going on in Hollywood. And speaking of Hollywood, um, this summer is when the Writers and Screen Actors Guild strikes started heating up. I mean, strikes in general started cropping up all over the place. When Venus goes retrograde, it gets tired of agreeing with things that don't work for her. She cares less about consensus and she's less afraid to say no. So now that Venus is turning around, she's thinking, okay, so I just said what I don't want, what I don't agree to. I've made some decisions, had some realizations. What would I like to create now? What do I say yes to? Venus is also now visible in the morning, and as a morning star, she's more concerned with fighting for what she wants, fighting for justice and whatever she thinks is morally right. In her evening star phase, she's more concerned with beauty, love, and pleasure. In this phase, we have more of a creatrix than a lover, more of a justice warrior than a fertility goddess. So now that Venus will be direct in Leo all month, we're turning our attention to making something right and making something authentic and true. And Myisha and I will talk more about this in a few minutes. And then tomorrow, Jupiter stations retrograde in Taurus. This week is heavily toned by Jupiter, and I love it. Such a different mood than last week. This week, we have the generous, optimistic, and forgiving nature of Jupiter, squaring Venus, who's also stationary, trining Mercury, and trining the Sun. Even though it's stationary and about to retrograde, it's very well placed as far as its degree is concerned. And in fact, as it stations retrograde tomorrow at the very same time, it makes that trine to Mercury. And so Jupiter is basically stabilizing and helping retrograde Mercury in Virgo figure out how to rebuild or reconfigure something. It's like Mercury is trying to reconstruct a bridge, and Jupiter comes along and gives it funding, tools. It arranges for all the permits so Mercury has an easier time doing its work. This is great. And then on the 8th, Jupiter trines the sun in Virgo, and here we're learning new things that could be a huge resource later. So with Jupiter and the sun, I'm looking more like at knowledge as a resource. The sun gets a huge dose of support and maybe even a sense of expansion. Jupiter trining the sun can help us see possibilities, but real, tangible possibilities where we have maybe felt too deep into the details. Like maybe we felt our focus narrowing, or maybe we were very worried about something. When we worry, that's another way that our attention or our focus it condenses, it contracts. So it'll be really nice to have Jupiter opening all that up. And it's just a nice sense of having options. And again, grounded in reality. That's the key word. We're dealing with a lot of Virgo, Taurus, earth sign stuff. And between those two trines, we have an important event on September 6th. We have Mercury's inferior conjunction to the sun, Mercury Cazimi. When Mercury conjoins the sun, on that very day, we achieve a moment of clarification about something. This marks the halfway point for Mercury's retrograde journey, and it's a reset or rebirth of Mercury. And it's being blessed by this contact with Jupiter. This would be a great day to embark on a new process for doing something, especially something that's going to make you or whatever you're working on healthier. This could be a new fitness regime, a new training program, a new writing schedule, a new investment strategy. And if you're uncomfortable starting something new during a retrograde, it's not always a bad thing to start something during a retrograde. A lot of people would argue with me on that, but I think there are some loopholes. Um, you can wait a little bit, but document or plan for it now because it really looks like something gets figured out here. And this particular retrograde just looks so very helpful. And remember, there are no hard and fast rules in astrology. There are just conditions, and they're always changing. But this week is very constructive. I hope you take advantage of it. We are going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to get a little more Venus centric, especially in regards to relationships, with sex and dating coach Myisha Battle. You're listening to the Cosmic Dispatch. I'm your host, Cory Nakasue, and with me via Zoom is sex and dating coach and author and Virgo and birthday girl, Myisha Battle. How you doing, Myisha?
I am doing so great. Thank you for asking.
Good. Can you introduce yourself for those who are not familiar with you or your work?
Yes, my name is Myisha Battle. I'm a sex and dating coach based in San Francisco, California. And I am also the author of the book, This is Supposed to Be Fun: How to Find Joy in Hooking Up, Settling Down, and Everything in Between. I'm always happy to be a guest with you, Cory. And there's a lot of stuff that's been going on that I'm I'm really itching to get into with you about relationships and love and sex and dating and all of it.
Oh my goodness. It this summer, um, yeah, wow. And we have so much, speaking of, we're still in summer. I know it's like Labor Day weekend and supposed to be end of summer. We still have some summer to go.
Mhm.
And we have so much Virgo going on right now. I'm just curious how, as a Virgo, how is Virgo season going for you so far?
It's been really good, actually. It has felt qualitatively a little bit different leading up to and like, around my birthday. But last week was really fun. I had a friend in town who was doing a performance at a gallery space here in San Francisco. She came up from LA and we've collaborated on music projects before. So I got a chance to sing with her and be a part of the performance, which was called O Virgo Splendens. And so there was a poem about Virgo. The performance piece was all kind of centered around her birth and, the birth of Virgo. And yeah, it was really fun to ring in Virgo season with something that was so pointedly Virgo. The three of us who sang were all Virgos as well. So yeah, it was a Virgo packed event.
Oh my God, perfect. And so your birthday is today. That
It
means
is.
you're getting this stationary Venus and Jupiter in a square aspect as part of your solar return. That could express a lot of ways, but I'm inclined to think of that as a very abundant and luxurious signature for this birthday year for you. And I also took a peek at your chart just to reacquaint myself with it. And
Mhm.
lo and behold, you have Venus in Leo natally as well. So I have two questions. Just, really quickly, how do you experience your Venus in Leo? That's question one. And what came up for you this past summer because of where your Venus is? You're getting your Venus return, but like three times over. So that's some major Venus information situations coming through. And I was wondering if you felt that.
I guess so. Now that you've pointed it out, as with you reaching out to have me on today's show, I was like reflecting on the last few months from a client perspective and going, oh yeah, there was a lot of richness there that I can talk about. And I think from my personal perspective, my relationship has gone to some different depths, which were interesting and challenging and rewarding. And yeah, just like depth, deepening. Like that's the word that just keeps coming up and up and up for me because I've been tasked to sort of be more me and be more available for my partner simultaneously. And so yeah, it's been it's been great, I think. I'll check in with him and see, but
Well,
his take on it. But I think I've actually done a lot of reflecting recently about like, wow, I feel like we've kind of come through something really new and like we're in a different place now. That's how I feel.
mm, and does Venus being placed in Leo like resonate for you as a Venus placement?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think of these things kind of archetypically, because my depth of knowledge around astrology is obviously nowhere near yours. But I think of being somebody who has Venus and Leo as like this is a part of my life that's very expressed outwardly, and it's very foundational to like how I move through the world. I've always been a relationship person, like always. And so not to the necessarily like serial monogamy degree, but I think I had to learn to sort of understand my place in relationship and also to learn how to negotiate in a relationship because I do want that full presence of myself, the like Leo-ness of it. I want to be seen in relationship as very like special. And so yeah, it's I do resonate with this.
And also, because it's your birthday, yeah, I got to tell you that when I peeked at your chart, Uranus was squaring your midheaven all summer and tickling your Venus. And Uranus is going to be all up in your Venus next year by way of a square. So you have more, I think you have more surprises, possibly feelings of restlessness, desires for like breaking free and doing something maybe radical. And because Uranus was squaring your MC all summer, um, that looks like a breakthrough in your work and your presence in the world, your visibility, Leo thing. Um, and like the and your that's when your book came out this year, and then
It did.
you did book tour during the summer.
Mhm.
So that seems to be, I don't know if it feels that way, like you've had some kind of like career breakthrough or something like that.
Yeah, and there's more to come. There's more coming like later this month, which I will tell you a little bit about later.
Oh, exciting. And so, okay, well, Venus Station, Venus Station Direct today, um, after doing its thing all summer. And what were some of the things that you did notice in your client work this summer?
Yeah, I jotted down some themes earlier, so I'm gonna just rattle them off and I'll try to take note of which ones you're like you nod vigorously to. Okay, the first one was, and this just kept coming up and up and up, autonomy versus loyalty,
Okay.
freedom versus responsibility to others, lust versus practical comforts, desire versus worthiness, thinking through versus feeling through issues that come up in relationship. That one is definitely a couples one, but desire versus worthiness I saw coming up with my dating clients as well as couples. I saw couples on the brink of calamity and then they came back. So that was really wonderful and also just yeah, I feel a great amount of a sense of honor to witness that process in couples. I also saw some renegotiating of relationship rules and recognizing new boundaries in relationship. That was a big theme as well. And then a big theme for my dating clients was just this so much yearning during the dating process. And I know that like, you know, people who especially are seeking out help in their dating life, they yearn to be in some kind of relationship or relationships. And so there is yearning, but I just felt like that was so heightened over the summer. And I do think that um, juxtaposition between the yearning, the wanting, the desire was also like accompanied by this like, am I worthy of this, or I'll never get this. And I actually heard you talk about that in last week's episode too, of, you know, you noticed this in your consultations, people being like, when is this going to happen and why can't it happen to me, and it's not going to happen the way that I want. So a lot of like tight ideas that maybe stand to they need room to breathe a little bit and grow and stretch. Yeah, those are the big themes that I noticed.
You just totally, well, you named a lot of very specific, like Venus and Leo types of things. Especially this like strong desire nature, and then Leo is look at me, see me. This is who I am. This is what I want. A lot of that, autonomy and being sovereign, but needing to have that individuality received. So it's not like the Aries independence where they're just off. They're just doing their own thing and they don't care who's looking at them. Leo's like, okay, I'm doing my thing. Do you see it? And do you love it? Do you receive it? Do you love me doing me? And also because we've had a lot of Taurus influence on that Venus and Leo. When you brought up, this one was really on point. Something about, this like wild, passionate desire nature versus practical considerations for, okay, well, but is this is this relationship, does it have legs? Is it, is it going to support me, and does it have longevity? Is it stable versus this, I just want to feel this passion, and how to navigate that and how to weigh that. And this goes back to a Venus thing of values. And you brought up worth, and and that's what a lot of people were like reassessing. It's like, I don't, what's important to me now? What's important to my partner now, this relationship, and what are certain things worth? And how is my partner reflecting my worth back to me? And so, yeah, you named a ton of things. And this whole Venus retrograde story over the summer just wasn't acting alone. It had that influence from Uranus and Jupiter both in Taurus, and we're still going through it this month and a little bit into October. And Uranus really complicates matters by pulling all of that personal experience into an environment that is in flux and into a whole population of people who are trying to break with old patterns, rules, and ideas about relationships and resources and what's desirable. And Jupiter, in the midst of all that, is trying to find some comfort and understanding and a way of doing things that it can rely on. And that's just a lot of added confusion for Venus, who's just trying to connect to themselves and express their desires authentically, and build relationships that honor their unique needs and capabilities and vision. And personally, on my end, during during consultations, I found myself mostly coaching, building relationships like you would an art piece or a creative artistic collaboration, where we're getting rid of any assumptions of a correct or healthy or proper way to do it, and bringing all of our interests and abilities and lack of ability and inspiration to the table, and deciding for ourselves and taking responsibility for creating something original that works specifically for the people involved. And in doing so, we satisfy, the Uranian things like the irrelevant relationship structures, but we also satisfy Jupiter by building our own overarching philosophy that we adhere to. And this is harder than it looks because there's a lot of pundits out there telling us what a healthy relationship or a good relationship is supposed to look like. And I feel like this takes away from the process of creative collaboration, which is why I like your approach. Speaking of relationship pundits and experts, because your approach seems very people centered and based on this very Leo thing of knowing and accepting who you are so you can co create a relationship that's satisfying. And then you have the book that came out this year. And I think the first chapter is Know Thyself. Is that correct?
That's the first section of the book.
The
Yeah.
first,
Mhm.
could you tell us? Yeah, I said a lot of things about just the my consultations were wild. People just really like trying to sort all of this stuff out, but that piece, that Venus and Leo piece of like know thyself and accept before, that's I just think that's so key.
Thank you. Yes. And I do think that knowing yourself is an ever evolving process that also evolves within relationship. So, relationships are relational. We are versions of ourselves with different people at different times. And what we learn from how we relate translates to different relationships that we have that go beyond romantic into friendship and family, relationships too. It's such a dynamic experience that we have that I think does call for a lot more self exploration, self reflection. um, One thing I wanted to pop in here real quick, and we can go here or not. But as we were talking, I realized that another big theme that I saw was um, the allure of the third, or the third as mirror to self. So people who are in relationships getting drawn to people outside of the relationship, who then get to reflect back to them what might be missing in the relationship, or um, having this need for a partner to support exploration outside, and accepting of the people who that one partner is attracted to. So I work with people who are monogamous, non monogamous, and I saw this theme in all forms, in every single form, whether it's, consensual non monogamy, where it's a kind of loose arrangement, to something that's a lot more codified and rules based, to we have a monogamous relationship. Why are you going to coffee with this other person? Yeah, and I just saw this need to be seen for, almost like to be seen for one's desires, because I think in sometimes when we get into a monogamous arrangement, or even when we're in non-monogamy but our partners are so used to us a certain way, when we desire so deeply, we are changed by that desire. And partners can feel threatened, partners can feel controlling, or that this type of connection requires a different rule or boundary to be placed around it, and to keep everybody safe, and the mechanism of co-creating this relationship to keep moving. So I wanted to pop that in there, but I do think that also ties back to this idea that like how we relate changes us, changes the relationship, changes our partners, and that can just be this ever evolving process.
Yeah, it's not a one and done. It's not like, okay, I'm gonna get in this relationship, figure out what the problems are, let's solve them, and now like we're good. Like that just doesn't.
But
And
that's how a lot of people operate.
I
It's
know.
very set it and forget it. It's very, I'm in this. This is how it is. This is how it will be. And, spoiler alert. No.
Yeah, and oh my, like I feel like we could have a whole conversation about basically what I'm hearing when you brought up bringing in a third is triangulation, which as a if we're in astrology and also with couples that I've worked with and also just friends and people myself, their triangulation is something that happens in every single relationship, even like the most traditional monogamous ones, whether it's when the children come, or whether it's with their work or their passion projects. Adding a third element, because if you just even like think of the number three, that's an odd number. All of a sudden, it throws in some energy and dynamism, and it kind of enlivens things. And like, I love what you said, we get to witness the people we're in relationship with desiring something else kind of from a little bit of a distance. And I've actually seen that create more desire. Now, whether then now that there's more desire, people do all sorts of things like try to control it because out of fear, or whether they learn how to enjoy that their relationship is still alive is another thing. But it happens, it happens even with dogs. I've seen like totally monogamous, traditional couples, and there'll be an issue because like the dog is just all there all the time and they love this animal, but it needs to happen. I've never just seen any happy arrangement with just two people, and there's not some like other thing to traffic in this new energy to keep the vitality. I've just never seen it. I mean, I've seen two people
Mm.
together forever stagnant, but I think that's not what most people are looking for when they get into even a friend relationship. We want
Yeah.
we want to feel ourselves.
Yeah. I hear a lot. I want to be challenged. I want to grow. I want someone who's here for my growth and their growth and all of that. But, talk is cheap if you can't live through that growth and, understand what that means, not only for that person and for you, but for the relationship dynamic.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. We have to take a short break, but when we come back, more relationship talk with Myisha Battle. You're listening to the Cosmic Dispatch. I'm your host, Cory Nakasue, and with me via Zoom is sex and dating coach and author Myisha Battle. And before the break, I mentioned how we were getting inundated with a lot of relationship advice from experts, everything from attachment theory to all kinds of politicized relationship structures, even astrological compatibility seems can be a little oppressive. Seems like everyone wants to weigh in on the right way to have a relationship. And Maisha, you recently wrote an article for Time magazine about the weaponization of therapy speak. And sometimes it seems to me that like all these like authority created constructs are actually getting in the way of human interaction. And yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my first thought is I have a master's in psychology, and there are still terms that I grapple with fully understanding their depth and meaning, and would be hard pressed to apply them to a situation that I barely know. Okay, so we have a lot of people out here who have read a blog post calling people, you know, names, and giving people diagnoses that they really don't have the foundational knowledge to do that. I mean, there are people who are trained to provide these diagnoses, and it takes working with a client directly to fully ascribe certain things. Now, do we have personality traits that might come out and might, have similar names to these diagnoses? The biggest one is like narcissism. That's just lobbed at anyone who has an inflated sense of ego these days. But if you've ever actually been in the presence of, been raised by, or in a relationship with a narcissist, you know that that is something very particular that has very damaging effects on relationships. It also is isolating for the person themselves. Narcissists, people who are clinically, narcissistic and have narcissistic personality disorder, really hard to treat. So it causes a lot of distress. It's not just a mean person. you know, which there are tons of mean people, and we can call them mean, right? We can say we don't like that. We can say their treatment is unfair. We can say they are self-absorbed and all of that. But I think I hesitate to label. I think also this comes from an ethical place in my practice as a coach, because as a coach, I am not licensed to provide diagnostic treatment for anyone. I have a copy of the DSM-5 and I haven't looked at it since I was in grad school. So I might even have the four, DSM-4. Like I might have an outdated version. But yeah, I think like the people are turning to social media for their mental health needs, and a conversation about mental health that needed to be had is happening. Unfortunately, the restrictions of social media mean that people are getting their knowledge and information in bite-sized chunks of 90 seconds or less from people with questionable backgrounds. Now, if you follow a therapist whose main um, line of work is around identifying and noticing the traits of toxic narcissism, yes, like that's cool. And follow through their entire account and see what they have to say. Follow their work, read their books, listen to podcasts that they're on. But I think be careful when trying to apply these terms to people in your life. That's my biggest pet peeve is, people come to me as a coach and they say, well, I saw this one person that said I shouldn't do X, Y, and Z in a relationship because of this. Um, or I can't have these boundaries in place because that's not being, considerate of their mental health and well-being. I'm like, damn, okay, we've gone too far, people. Like we really, really have gone beyond. And I personally think there are as many ways to be in relationship as there are human beings on the planet. So anyone who's telling you that there is this one way to get into a relationship, be in a relationship, be worthy of a relationship, they are selling you snake oil. This is just not how humans have worked for since the dawn of time. I really hope that people can take the wonderful things that this new conversation about mental health and wellness and boundaries and all of that. I want them to take the good nuggets of that, which is, oh, like I'm a person who goes through life and has feelings about things. And I probably need to express those feelings to somebody. And when they're really challenging, I should go to a trained professional to help me. And that trained professional, by the way, doesn't necessarily need to be a therapist. I really like the idea of everybody in therapy, but also it doesn't work for some people. Narcissists are just one example, right? Of like maybe narcissists aren't going to see that much growth from going to a therapist unless they are specially trained in working with narcissists. Um, so yeah, that's just a lot. Those are kind of my like kitchen sink thoughts all scrambled up into one about the state that we're in right now, and sort of how I see that trickling into my work with my clients as well. A lot of people coming with some strong ideas about what they should do based on somebody they don't know that they've just seen through a screen.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you boil it down to that, right? It's like, what? Why are we taking these people's advice seriously? Um, yeah, it's because it's convenient, because it's free, because it seems very authoritative. That's the other thing too, is that a lot of these accounts seem really legit and seem like they are trying to add something to the conversation. But my rule of thumb is like check credentials always, check your sources, and be skeptical of somebody who is being very prescriptive about what certain things are or aren't. Because actually, if you talk to a therapist, certain things that present one way might be something else entirely that you don't really know until you've delved in very deeply with a client over a period of time. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents.
And also like actually work through the relationship. Like there are so many memes and little infographics on social media, from like some coaches who will be like, if they're doing this to you, then this means that, and then you need to like cut them off because you're not being treated well. And then that person like goes to their therapist or their friend or whoever, and they're like, okay, they're doing this and it means that, so here's what, without even like engaging the human that they're in a relationship with. um and so, that might just be a whole other like social media thing. It actually is facilitating us not mixing it up with other people, and that takes practice. We need to like do that and maybe fail sometimes, but we need to be in the relationship with that person, asking questions instead of trying to, and this same with astrology. People try to they see a person's behavior and they try to assess what it means without actually engaging with the person. And yeah, that drives me crazy. um
Yes. I mean, I am 41 years old today, and this is the first relationship that I've been in. I've been with my partner for 5 years, just over 5 years, that I feel I can be an effective communicator about what I think, what I feel. We can get into the weeds of how he thinks, how he feels, where we went wrong, why he said the things he said. Yes, we're both in therapy, so we can go like, yeah, that's the thing from my childhood. Sorry, I'll own that. But also, you were kind of this way, and I didn't like that either, which made the situation worse. And that kind of communication requires a lot from both parties. The reason that we got here is because of all of the relationship failures that we had in the past, and our desire to get better at being more present for the hard stuff that comes up in relationship, and not missing red flags when they actually are red flags, not necessarily discarding people, but being like, hey, like, oh, I'm having feelings. I just keep coming back to that. Like, we are people who have feelings. Our feelings are kind of these, guideposts or like signs that something may be amiss for whatever reason. It doesn't necessarily mean that person is a terrible person who you need to just discard from your life forever. It might mean that they made a mistake. It might mean that they made a really actually terrible mistake that can never be forgiven. But you have to figure that out together. So I fully agree. Like, we only get better by, the relationship challenges that we have. And I think that relationship communication is hard, sexual communication really hard. And these are things that we really are never taught. The conversation about consent, that's just been started. So a lot of things, we're in the baby stages of trying to figure out how to be better in relationships, because those relationships that you mentioned earlier where people are kind of complacently miserable, I don't know, is that just, like, but both agree that like, this is just what it is for us and we're not going to change, right? This newer generation of human beings is not going to settle for that. And so how do you get to something that is more dynamic than that without the work of being better communicators about what we're thinking and feeling and how things affect us in relationship? Don't think you can get there without the talking part.
yeah, be in the relationship. Well, Maisha, we're starting to run out of time. So I want to know what you're up to. You have
Oh,
anything
yeah.
soon?
Yes. So I do have a new podcast project that I cannot disclose the full details of yet, but it will be out later this month, possibly early October. And if you want to stay in the loop about it, I can tell you it is an advice podcast, but it is by me. I'm an expert in relationships, and people submit their questions and I will answer them to the best of my ability. But it's also meant to be fun and to provide people with the opportunity to be like a little fly on the wall when it comes to sex
Mm.
and dating and to learn about different issues that are popping up in relationships and sex and dating that we don't talk about. So, if you want to stay in the loop, please go to my website, myishabattle.com, sign up for my newsletter, or follow me on social at Myisha Battle.
Okay, and you have so many other fun things. Like you have the
I
Time
do.
magazine articles, of which there were three, and we didn't even get to talk about the other ones. And you have a zine.
I do. Yeah, it's a monthly sex scene called Better Sex. And we focus on a topic every month and take a deep dive. So I'd like to think of it as adult sex ed delivered right to your inbox.
Fantastic. See, everybody, so many ways, so much help and guidance to help you deal with all the maybe new things that you've discovered about yourself over this recent Venus retrograde. Well, thank you so much, Myisha, for joining me as usual, and happy birthday.
Thank
I
you.
hope it's a good one.
So far, so good. I got to be here with you.
I really appreciate that. So I hope you do something fabulous tonight, and I'll see y'all next week. Same time, same place. Take care.